Hello, you're watching TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. A Ukrainian general in exile with whispers of a political future that could shake Kyiv to its core. Valerii Zaluzhnyi isn't running for president, at least not yet, but everyone from Trump's circle to Ukraine's oligarchs seems to be waiting for his move. In London, the war hero has become Ukraine's most powerful political question mark. Elections in Ukraine won't come this week or next month. Ukraine is at war, and until that changes, the electoral process will not convene. But now, regardless of that today, we're looking at one of the most fascinating political stories to emerge from Ukraine since the war began, the waiting game of General Valerii Zaluzhnyi. Now, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Valerii Zaluzhnyi, Ukraine's former commander-in-chief, is a national hero known as the Iron General for leading the country's defense against Russia's 2022 invasion. Born in 1973, he rose through the military ranks, earning praise for his modern, NATO-aligned reforms and decisive leadership during the war's early days. His popularity remains sky-high, with polls showing 73% of Ukrainians trust him, outranking most politicians. Zaluzhnyi's military career spans decades of service. After graduating from the Odessa Military Academy, he held various command positions, gaining experience in Ukraine's rapidly evolving armed forces. By 2014, during Russia's annexation of Crimea and the outbreak of war in Donbas, Zaluzhnyi was actively involved in combat operations, serving as a commander in eastern Ukraine. His first-hand experience in the Donbas conflict shaped his understanding of modern warfare and the Russian military tactics. After tensions with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Zaluzhnyi was dismissed in February 2024 and appointed Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. Now in London, he focuses on diplomacy, representing Ukraine's interest and maintaining ties with Western allies. Despite his diplomatic role, he stays engaged with Ukraine's military, monitoring battlefield developments.
Now let's zone in on the East planning portion of our show. The relationship between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and former Commander-in-Chief Valerii Zaluzhnyi grew tense due to strategic disagreements and Zaluzhnyi's popularity during the war against Russia.
The relationship between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and former Commander-in-Chief Valerii Zaluzhnyi has been marked by tension and strategic differences during Ukraine's war against Russia. As a highly popular military leader, Zaluzhnyi led Ukraine's defense against Russia's 2022 invasion, earning widespread trust. However, disagreements with Zelenskyy over military strategy, including mobilization efforts and the 2023 counteroffensive's failure, strained their ties. Zelensky's direct involvement in military decisions and Zaluzhnyi's rising public profile fueled perceptions of a political rivalry. In February 2024, Zelenskyy dismissed Zaluzhnyi, appointing him ambassador to the UK, a move seen by many as sidelining a potential challenger. Despite public displays of unity, such as a cordial handshake at Zaluzhnyi's Hero of Ukraine award ceremony, speculation persists about his political ambitions, with polls suggesting he could defeat Zelenskyy in a future election.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. If you know Ukraine's modern history, you know Valerii Zaluzhnyi. He was the commander-in-chief who helped repel Russia's initial onslaught in 2022. He became a national symbol, respected in the army, admired by ordinary citizens, and even mythologized in Western capitals as the general who stood up to Putin. But last year, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy dismissed him from his post and reassigned him as Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom. Now, on paper, it looked like a lateral move. In reality, it was exile with a diplomatic cover. Now, since arriving in London, Zaluzhnyi has lived a quieter life, posting selfies with his wife on Tower Bridge, going to the theater, and playing the role of envoy rather than warrior. Yet many continue to wonder whether Zaluzhnyi intends to one day run for president of Ukraine. Now, the story came into focus in March, just after the disastrous confrontation between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the Oval Office. Some in Washington reportedly began wondering aloud if Ukraine's president had outlived his usefulness. J.D. Vance's team reached out through various channels trying to arrange a call with Zaluzhnyi in London. Now, if that's true, then a senior figure in the White House wanted to bypass Ukraine's sitting president and talk directly to his ex-army chief now stationed abroad. Now, for any Ukrainian leader, that's an alarm bell. For Zaluzhny, it was a trap. After checking with Zelenskyy's chief of staff, he refused to take the call. It was a telling decision. He may be popular, may be courted by oligarchs and foreign politicians alike, but Zaluzhny is still operating like a soldier. He follows the chain of command, and he will not openly break with his president while the war continues. But now that hasn't stopped others from trying to recruit him. Paul Manafort, who once managed Trump's campaign, reportedly offered Zaluzhny his services as a political consultant for a future election. The general politely declined. At home, President Zelenskyy's team is not blind to the danger. Last year, his chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, met with Zaluzhny and suggested he join the president's political bloc, presenting a united front. Zaluzhny declined again, but he promised not to criticize Zelenskyy publicly and not to spring any, quote, nasty surprises. And if he ever decides to run, he said they would hear it from him first privately. Now, Zaluzhny is out of uniform, but still in the game. He is a general adored for boldness, yet in politics, he plays for time. He has the second most recognizable face in Ukraine, yet he avoids interviews and lets rumors swirl. Zaluzhny may be Zelenskyy's greatest rival, yet he has so far refused to act like one. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Taras Kuzio, professor of political science at the National University of Kyiv Mohyla Academy. So glad to have you here with us on Eastern Express. Now, let me get straight into it and ask you this. So at the moment, Ukraine legally cannot hold elections during wartime. But now polling suggests that Zaluzhny would be the only serious challenger to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. But now my question to you is, do you believe that he is preparing for a political run once conditions allow it? And also, how exactly would he actually pose a threat to Zelenskyy?
Well, he's never, ever mentioned that he's going to stand in any election. So all of this is hypothetical. Opinion polls place him in the data, but he's General Zaluzhny. He's a diplomat. He's the ambassador to Ukraine for United Kingdom. So he's never actually publicly come out and said he's going to stand in the future election. So we don't know. To me, the most important thing isn't so much that, is that how Ukrainian politics has changed completely in the last 3-5 years. There's no longer a pro-Russian camp in Ukraine. That's gone. They are completely marginalized now, and they have no votes. So the Ukraine has become some ways more normalized like a European country, where the only real two choices are centrists like the current president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, or center-right politicians like either the former president Petro Poroshenko or General Zaluzhny. Zaluzhny is very similar in his political views, center-right, sort of Ukraine calls it National Democrat or Christian Democrat, to Poroshenko. So those are the two major camps in Ukraine who would be fighting it out in a future election. If Zaluzhny were to stand, Poroshenko said he would not, and he would support Zaluzhny. So I think this is, to me, this is shows a kind of a Europeanization of Ukrainian politics. It's not surprising that Zelenskyy could potentially lose. After all, Winston Churchill lost the 1945 elections in Britain.
But let me ask you this, just to go a little bit deeper into what you said. I mean, for instance, in the months between those first U.S. warnings in October 2021, right, when right before Russia invaded Ukraine, Zaluzhny frequently pushed for more intensive preparations for a possible Russian attack, and Zelenskyy was a little bit more skeptical, and he didn't want to cause panic on that as well. So again, and there were those rumors, of course, that they possibly clashed somewhere. The fact that Zelenskyy decided to send him to the United Kingdom to become ambassador. So my other second question to you is, I really want you to say, why would you think that really does, I mean, even these steps, the fact that Zelensky pushed him to the United Kingdom to become ambassador, is he really being viewed as a threat? And let's not forget that Zaluzhnyi is trying to keep a notably quiet profile in the UK, right? I mean, from everything that we can read in the media, I mean, he's being quiet. He's not really, I mean, J.D. Vance, right, tried to even phone him after that spat in the Oval Office, and he's also being very, very quiet about that. So what's that deal?
Well, a number of factors. Firstly, General Zaluzhnyi is a Ukrainian patriot, so just like anybody in that position, he's not going to allow a foreign country, in this case the United States through Vice President Vance, to try and divide and rule between Ukrainian politicians. The Vance interference, sadly, is a product of Russian propaganda and Russian disinformation, which has been brought on board by President Trump. President Trump has been repeating Russian propaganda that Zelensky is not legitimate as a Ukrainian president, and Vance was just implementing Trump's orders. Of course, this is not true, and it's not true according to the Ukrainian constitution. No Western country during World War II could hold an election during wartime, when you have martial law, and the same in Ukraine. In the case of Zelensky Zaluzhnyi, yes, I think there is two types of criticism you could say, and that is that Zelensky doesn't like to be kind of competed against by powerful and popular figures like General Zaluzhnyi, who had a lot of general popular sentiment throughout Ukraine. And so I think it was very mistaken on the part of Zelensky to get rid of him and move him to London. I mean, he's not a diplomat, he's a military officer. And he should have been moved to another position in the Ministry of Defense, not sent to London, as it were, in exile. So I think that is something that can be criticized of Zelensky. But I think more importantly, the things that can't be talked about now during war, because you don't want to give ammunition to Russia. And these are criticisms of the way that President Zelensky was not prepared for the invasion, and what you alluded to, in fact. Mm-hmm. And there's many things which will come out in an election campaign which will be very hurtful for Zelensky, which will hurt him. For example, why did he not believe Western intelligence, mm-hmm. which was saying this privately and publicly, that Russia was going to invade? I mean, American intelligence was perfectly on time. They actually said the dates and when and how Ukraine was going to be invaded. Why did Zelensky believe he knew better than American intelligence, which is the best intelligence in the world? So that's one criticism. Second criticism, why did he not prepare for the invasion? I mean, two particular avenues of invasion were simply, there were no defenses there. So the invasion from Belarus going straight down to Kyiv, why was the border not fortified, Belarusian-Ukrainian border north of Kyiv? What it is today, but it wasn't in 2022. But more importantly, I think the biggest criticism will be, why did the Russians have such an easy job of invading southern Ukraine from Crimea?
Right.
Because there were no fortifications or minefields or bridges blown up on the boundary line between Crimea and Kherson region. Mm-hmm. And that's where Russia could have been stopped from entering southern Ukraine. And as we know, once Russia's in southern Ukraine, it's going to be very difficult for Ukraine to remove Russia from that region. And the whole purpose of Russia was to move into southern Ukraine from Crimea and to connect that region up to Donetsk in the east, which is what Russia's done. So these are major criticisms of Zelensky, which today are not really discussed, but which of course will come out in the election campaign and will hurt Zelenskyy very badly.
That was definitely my next question to you, Professor. You made a lot of incredibly important points right there. But let me ask you this now. I mean, you know, since we are talking about Zaluzhnyi, I want to ask you this. Do you think, though, that with everything you mentioned, you even said that Zelenskyy should have put him, into the defense. He shouldn't have sent him out, to the UK and got rid of him and sent him as ambassador. But now let me ask you this. Do you think that Zaluzhnyi has the political instincts necessary to lead a country, to lead Ukraine, and not just an army?
That's impossible to know until an election campaign happens, and it depends on what advisors and the election team he creates. He certainly would be supported by the Petro Poroshenko team, the former president. I mean, he has a political party, European Solidarity, which is the biggest opposition party to President Zelenskyy's Servant of the People party in the Ukrainian parliament. So Zaluzhnyi wouldn't be coming with empty hands in an election campaign. He would have a strong support on the center-right. And Ukraine's center-right, the so-called National Democratic camp, has always been quite pro-Western, anti-Russian, and very patriotic. So Zaluzhnyi would have the support of those. He seems to be somebody who has a different personality to Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy seems to be quite narcissistic, quite kind of, because of his media background. He was an actor. So I'm not sure to what degree he listens to advice. Whereas I think Zaluzhnyi is more of a team player in that sense. So I think he will have that potential advantage. To me, the most important thing is that there will be a strong center-right National Democratic competition to Zelenskyy's team in a future election. And because of wartime conditions and Russian atrocities, Ukrainian patriotism and nationalism has grown. That's inevitable in every war. And so I think there's a very good chance of the center-right winning both presidential and parliamentary elections. But before we get to that, we need to end the war so that there can be an election.
But just my final brief question to you. I mean, I know it's very difficult to predict, but very briefly, Professor, do you think, straight up, can you predict that Valerii Zaluzhnyi will become Ukraine's future president with the way that the war is continuing right now, and with the way that Ukraine, and with how Ukraine stands currently at the time being?
I think Zaluzhnyi has a very good chance because of this growth of patriotism and nationalism during the war, which is inevitable in every country during wartime. And because he has the support of that competing to Zelenskyy. Zelensky's a centrist. He is a centrist politics, competing center-right grouping, and which is very powerful in Ukrainian politics. I think he has a very good chance of that. But as I say, those elections can't take place until the war is ended. And that is going to be the more difficult question, not so much Zaluzhnyi. Ukrainians have held free elections ever since 1991. Russia has never held a free election since the 1990s. So there will be a free election once the war is finished. And the competition will be between Zelenskyy representing a centrist camp and Zaluzhnyi and Poroshenko representing a center-right camp. I suspect the center-right camp will win parliamentary and presidential elections.
Only time will tell when the war is finished, hopefully sooner than later. Thank you so much, Professor Taras Kuzio, for being with us here on Eastern Express. And we move on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Moscow says it's helping people in the Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, but many there can't even get clean water. The situation is deteriorating by the day.
In the Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, water is becoming a luxury. In Luhansk and Donetsk, years of war and neglect have wrecked the pipes. In Kherson and Zaporizhia, the 2023 destruction of the Kakhovka Dam dried up reservoirs, and in Crimea, drought is making things even harder. People say that the tap water is yellow, smells bad, and isn't safe to drink. Bottled water is on the shelves, but prices keep rising. Boiling tap water? Not an option anymore for many. Despite all this, the Kremlin is demanding even more Ukrainian land in peace talks, while doing little to fix the crisis it caused.
Tajikistan's biggest infrastructure project, the Rogun hydropower plant, is now facing serious delays. The World Bank and other backers are holding off on funding until the government meets key conditions.
Rogun is supposed to be Tajikistan's path to energy independence, but it's also a massive financial burden. The dam needs over $6 billion more to finish, nearly half the country's projected GDP. The World Bank wants a clear plan on how Tajikistan will pay for it without going into unsustainable debt, how it will sell the electricity, and how it will keep the dam safe. Until then, no more money. Environmental groups are also raising alarms. They say filling the dam could cut the Amudarya river's flow by 25%, threatening millions of people downstream in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. For now, 2 turbines are running, but progress has slowed. And with rising costs and growing opposition, Rogun's future is uncertain.
An initiative in the United Kingdom called the Ukrainian Community Association, or LUKA, is working on quite a unique project. Its members are repurposing used e-cigarette batteries and electronic parts to send them as energy power supplies for Ukrainian troops.
Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are located in positions that are very difficult to access, and for good reason, but that means that often these men are left without certain necessities, like electricity. The repurposed batteries and electronic parts can be used as light sources and small heaters that can, in turn, be used for cooking. Although this is a minor help, in the grand scheme of the aid required by Ukrainian soldiers, every bit counts. There is a nigh endless supply of the batteries in the UK, as it is estimated that over 8 million such devices are discarded each week. Members of the LUKA often work in pairs or trios to disassemble the used e-cigarettes and separate the batteries from the rest of the devices. The group is currently looking for more volunteers to help with the initiative.
And that's all for this edition of Eastern Express here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, and stay with us here for more.